we're back, everyone. After a short relocation, we had some technical problems, so we had to relocate. So, Anas, before the break, we were talking about the tactics of job hunters in terms of that entry-level position, and we had moved towards the mid-career position. And I was making the point that at the mid-career, you have different options available to you.
Yeah.
It's not just sort of that referral to get your first job, to get your foot in the door, to get that first experience. You're actually at that point now where you have more flexibility. You should take advantage of your network, but you would also be foolish not to sort of advertise yourself a bit more. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, what I see, what I notice specifically in Dubai and in the region, that there's so many people go without any planning. Like the moment they land in a job, that's it. They forget they sleep. I call them the sleepy. They go in a coma till they wake up on a resignation letter or like something negative happens to them, and they are forced to leave the company. So you should then let yourself to go into that phase. What you better do is to keep an open eye for what's in the market there. Let the technology helps you. Use LinkedIn job finder application. Keep it on. You can save up to 10 searches on LinkedIn jobs. And by that 10 searches with different 10 criteria, you can navigate all the available jobs out there.
Yeah.
So you would be alerted, who would mind a better opportunity, not only when it comes to money, but sometimes there is definitely a better opportunity out there for you. If you're not alerted, if you're not aware of that, who would come and tell you? Would the HR come and, tap on your shoulder and tell you, well, I'm thinking of, you're a very good person, you deserve a next move? It will never happen.
It doesn't happen. You don't get that kind of feed. It's really one of the unfortunate things, having worked in HR for so long too, is sometimes I'll do interviews with candidates and I say, I wish I could give you the real feedback, but it's not my job to me to coach you to be a better interviewee.
Yeah.
Right? Is I have to give the next candidate the chance. So, and to your earlier point, looking for a job is a job.
Yeah.
And people have to approach it with that type of discipline. Because from an organization's point of view, and again, I've said this many times, I don't think people appreciate, when you're the recruiter, you have a problem. You have to find a solution. And people who present themselves as a solution are right away getting your attention as the recruiter.
Absolutely.
If you're the job seeker and say, I have a problem, to someone who's trying to solve a problem, they're just going to zone out, right? You literally zone out of that.
It's so logic.
Yeah.
It's so logic, but still yet, the moment so many people, more than 80% of the people that you meet, the moment they are out of their job, they tag themselves with, I'm a job seeker.
Yeah.
They go and update their LinkedIn and they say, I'm a job seeker. They go and when they go for a networking session, they introduce themselves as a job seeker. Why?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's
you've got so much of good stuff that you can show, your skills. Solution. Be the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, that's actually in my notes later to say, is be the solution. Resolve someone's problem. So if we're moving on to sort of more senior positions now, in terms of tactics for finding positions.
Yeah, just let me also add into our tips before going to the senior, which is, I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel peace at work, but you should. One of the famous bloggers about career, JT Dionel in the States, says that there is no secure job.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't feel secure at any point of a time, but you also should give yourself some positive feeling while you are working, and it's good to keep an eye open. I don't want you to sleep in there. Meaning to say that keep on developing yourself.
Yeah.
Keep on that personal development. Never say I know everything and I'm absolutely. And the reason I'm mentioning this, I met very few people who are saying I work in a perfect company, my dream job, and I'm not going for any development.
I just, why would anyone say
and guess
that
what?
in this day and age?
She was an HR.
Yeah. Wow.
she was an HR person. She
Yeah.
said that I couldn't believe that she said that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm like,
It's
highlighting this
disappointing,
issue.
is part of, and we talk about the senior level, and even when you're at that talent level, when you're a celebrity in your field. In other words, when people say, and I've done this before when I've been recruiting, when I was working for the technology company, I said to my boss and the CTO, I said, okay, you guys, who is your ideal candidate for this position? And for me as HR, what I was trying to do was to develop a candidate profile. And in the process of describing the ideal candidate, I said, who is that person?
Okay.
And they gave the name, and I said, well, why don't we approach them? And they were, no, they'll never come work for us. How do you know? What's the worst that can happen? They can say no. And it turned out that person was the person we ended up recruiting, because they were looking for an opportunity like ours at that time. So to your point about developing yourself, to your point about always sort of investing in and being open to opportunities, it's more true than it's ever been. And the story I'm telling you is 10 years old.
Okay.
So these are things that are actually becoming even more important, not less important.
I just want to remind our dear viewers that we are watching the HRME chat hashtag. Unfortunately, today we're only on Facebook, so there is no Periscope. So any comment that you would like to share with us, or a question or an experience that you already had, please you can comment here on Facebook, or you can share it with us on Twitter. I'm keeping an eye on the Twitter feed of HRME chat.
So just sort of on my sort of last point and sort of that mid-career is that's the time when you have the most flexibility to take risks too, in terms of a tactic. You look at entry-level people, they want to get in. When you're senior, when you're at that talent level, you have a lot of things in your decision-making process, and you just simply don't take as many risks. You may have family, you may have other commitments, and if nothing else, there's less opportunities out there that may entice you. So people who are at that mid-career, that's when they should be really looking for those opportunities that are like stretch goals, that really move them into a level that they probably wouldn't take 5 years from now. It's riskier, but that's the time to be taking those risks.
Yeah, and there's also another point that we should highlight here, Brad, is the fact that when you meet mid-senior level, they would tell you, I'm open for any opportunity. And the moment I hear that statement from someone, I know that they have lack of focus, or they are desperate.
Or
what's your thought?
They're not as senior as they think they are.
Okay.
It's to the point I was talking earlier about talent. Is a lot of people who are 15, 20 years, 25, 30 years into their career, they consider themselves very senior, but if you're still sort of approaching your work that way, maybe you're not as senior as you think you are, or your senior is seniority rather than sort of the ability to do something of value added today at a strategic level. There's that expression, is the experience. We spend so much time focusing on years of experience, but if someone's doing the same thing repeatedly, it doesn't matter if it's 1 year or 20 years, it's 1 year of experience done 20 times. And so there's a big difference between being senior in terms of your up-to-date knowledge and capability to do something in a particular role, and being senior in terms of your age or the amount of years of work experience you have.
That's a very nice point. This is also not so many people. Usually I hear such comment from. Thank you very much, Brad. And this is makes a point, makes a difference. So let me ask you, as an HR manager and hiring manager in the past years you've been recruiting, when you hear that I'm open for any opportunity, what do you think of that person?
Well, again, they haven't solved the problem for me. They're giving me a problem. I have to work for them to become focused, to help them. I become their career coach when I have a need as a recruiter. And so I zone out. There's other people may have different approaches, but I have a need in the back of my head. I'm not going to give you that need unless you present me with information that suggests you might be a solution to that need. So the best answer I can give you is I zone out.
But don't you think that there are maybe so many jobs or few jobs that require someone generalist? Like,
But
they can take on.
But then you say that you're a generalist and you explain what you mean by a generalist. Because one person's generalist is another person's specialist, and it can be very different whether you're at an entry level, mid-level, or senior level. You need to give the person that information that demonstrates where you fit into that sort of hierarchy or matrix.
So the reason I'm asking this is like, we hear a lot from job seekers and someone who's switching or pivoting or looking for a job. And that lady, she's like a minimum of 15 years of experience. She told me, look, I'm a generalist.
Yeah.
I'm a generalist. I'm looking for and like you say, like I zoned out because okay, where shall I focus my radar on, which industry or which person or which hiring manager or which position. And in fact, I couldn't get back to her with any openings because I didn't know where to recommend her.
I think, having heard you elaborate on that point, what I would say is that a generalist 10 years ago was much more general than a generalist today. In other words, to be a true generalist, as years go by, you actually have to have more and more depth of specialization in different categories, and that's the challenge. It's not just about saying I'm a jack of all trades, because work is becoming more complex. The demands on work, the demands on organizations, whether that's globalization, whether that's technology, whether that's the speed of change, all of these things demand generalists to have slightly deeper levels of specialization. Because if you're a generalist at the surface, without something that has roots in some specialization, you're not really able to connect with sort of bringing all of those general activities together. You need to get the respect of all of the stakeholders that you interact with. And if you're so vague or so on the surface, that level of generalist is, just not of high demand in the marketplace.
Shane Phillips says 21st century, it's the death of generalists.
I think the definition just changes. What someone could get away with. It's like education itself. You go back 30, 40 years, if you had a bachelor's degree, you were unique, right? You were the elite of your population. Today, if you don't have a bachelor's degree, you might as well look for a job that has some element of labor to it, some element of routine work to it, because the expectation of the market is a higher level of general education. So I don't think there's a death of a generalist. I think that our definition of a generalist is deeper pillars of specialization that would have been the case in the past.
Interesting. So shall we jump into the last category, which is the seniors?
Well, senior, yeah. I mean, I guess you think about the tactics of someone at a senior job level. What defines that? And I would suggest that arguably if you're truly at a senior level of responsibility, in other words, you're near the top of some hierarchy, you're more likely a passive candidate rather than an active candidate.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be approached than to actually go out and look for jobs. And so the ratio of your tactics is fundamentally changing, from the entry-level position to the senior-level position. But this is where, to your earlier point, you can't be lazy about this. You can't assume that if you're like a store and people are going to come and shop at your store. You still have to market yourself in this day and age. You have to aspire to be the answer to, when someone asks the question, name the top 5 CFOs in Dubai, you want to aspire to be in that category. And it doesn't matter if it's HR, finance, marketing, construction, retail, all of that. That's something that you should be aspiring for.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I meet also like on a constant base those people who know what they want, but when you ask them such question, name the top 3 of your industry, they have no idea.
Yeah.
And that gives you like, okay, so like we zoned out this, you lost too early.
And you know, this comes into your area of specialization in social media, is that the platform to develop your personal brand awareness is so powerful today.
Yeah,
And I'm going to
it
be
is.
very specific in HR. I know lots of people around the world that are known by a lot of HR people, but they're not necessarily competent at HR. They've done a great job at marketing themselves and promoting themselves, and a lot of them are even people who are bloggers. They have LinkedIn, regular articles that they contribute, and I'm confident that the vast majority of competent people in the HR space don't necessarily perceive these people as being elite, being at the talent, but yet at the same time they've created an element of job security for themselves. They've created a demand for themselves, and they do get expressions of interest. They do get opportunities to speak at different events. They do get opportunities to travel and develop. And so from that point of view, it's kind of like what we talked about before, the fake it until you make it syndrome, is even if they're not of the level that they deserve based on their current capabilities, they're working on developing them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
It is. Yesterday I spoke much about, so after the conference we went for a 3 hours LinkedIn workshop. It was free, open for all Omanis in Oman. And we spoke much about personal branding and the way you need to position yourself out there, and you need to anchor your personal brand with already existed shakers and movers of that industry, of a specific industry. And now it cannot be easier than using either Twitter or any social media platform or LinkedIn, and then you would be able to be there. And one of the attendees asked me, like, I'm not good in writing at all. And I said, like, you know, you shouldn't be, or you don't need to be a writer. You can go and ask few people already, or even easier, you can go and read the top 5 articles from your industry and say that, let's say we are talking about entrepreneurship. So I would grab the latest article of Richard Branson, the latest article, let's say, about entrepreneurship in Dubai, and I would mix. I would put the global perspective, the regional perspective, and the local perspective. And then I just share my thoughts with the top entrepreneurs in the country. Like, we are here, we're having a guest, a live guest here, Muhammad. Muhammad has done it himself 3 years ago, probably, Muhammad. You went and you talked with top sales engineers in Dubai, and you wrote almost like a white paper based on Shane Phillips' advice. Can you tell us, like, you know, in 1 minute, how was the experience and what that white paper has made for you? I'm gonna turn the camera on you, Muhammad. I'm gonna switch the camera.
No.
You gotta brand
now,
yourself.
Muhammad,
Brand
you're
yourself.
there. Hello, here's Muhammad.
Thank you for the surprise, Anas.
That's social media, right? It's
Yeah, no,
surprises.
this thing is so quickly. He did not
Muhammad, you've
tell-
got 1 minute to tell
Okay.
us about your white paper that you have done 3 years ago, and, like, you know, how you made it, how easy was it to write and put all things together, and what is the self-satisfaction that gives to you, and what has, like, you know, what was the perks after circulating that white paper?
Well, hi guys, hi everyone. Thank you, Anas, for this. It was so quickly, and I'm really not really ready to do this. Okay, what I did actually, guys, is I just went and to, how you can say, Yellow Pages, call 181 and check the numbers, and I called every sales engineer I can get in contact in each company, and I met, let's say, about, like, I won't say like most of them, but let's say like 40% of who I have called.
That's a success rate, Muhammad.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
sales, if
Yeah.
you hit 20%, you're a very successful salesperson.
And I would just generally ask them, like, what do you think of your job? How do you rate it? What do you think about it? What's your best practices? What the pros of cons of this job? And by the end of it, I wrote a white paper, as Anas said, and I started spreading it around the sales managers. To be honest, I was not really successful with the sales manager. I did not have that feedback. I only had a feedback from one of them. But eventually, after all of that connections and how can I say, experience I built around them and the relationship, I landed a job in one of the companies.
Whoa.
it's a
So
great,
you heard it.
It's a great story, you know.
So
and,
you heard it.
and this is the difference between theory and practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
We learn so much from applied, you know, doing success as opposed to things in theory. And HR people are really bad for talking a lot about in theory. And this is one of the transitions of our profession, is focusing more on the outcomes. And Mohammed's examples is such a good example of work ethic, because that's what we're really talking about. When we talk about looking for talented people, you can break every person up into sort of three elemental parts: their knowledge, their skills, and then some other attributes, right? And these are the KSAs that define a competency. And the irony is, in terms of recruiters, in terms of HR, is we often focus on the knowledge. We focus a little bit on the skill, and we often put the least amount of weighting on this other attribute, these other abilities. And those other abilities are your work ethic. Those are the intangibles that are truly unique to you. Because in education, you probably graduated from a school, and maybe 200 other people have the same, were in your class.
Exactly. I like that.
You-
Previously, you've
Yeah,
mentioned
and
that.
in terms of the skill sets that you have, what are your skills? You know, people who say, well, I surf the internet, I speak
I'm flexible.
English, I'm flexible, you
I'm
know?
global.
Yeah, and so there's nothing differentiating about you, but when you're looking for a job and you do something that completely differentiates yourself, that especially that focuses on work ethic, wow, from a recruiter's point of view, you're going to, if I'm the first interview, I'm already sending you to the second interview, because you've demonstrated so much to me that you've earned the right to go to the next step.
Speaking of demonstration, Brad, last week one of my friends approached me and told me, Anas, I'm hiring 2 social media managers. Can you please help me with that? So I posted and I said, please send me the URLs of your social media accounts.
Right.
I don't need a CV.
Right.
I need something that you worked on and your personal brand.
Right.
To your surprise and to my surprise, there's so many people didn't know how to copy the URL of their social media accounts and send it to me. And I see it in a direct message, and they kept doing it in comments. Like, you know, a comment is different than a direct message. So the purpose of mentioning this is, like, you should read. You should read when it comes to job posts, and listen to what they are asking for, and then by this I can easily filter the good candidates and the very potential candidates out of the just someone I'm looking for a job.
Sure. And that's a specific example for a specific type of work.
Yeah.
But you've actually added to my earlier point about this generalist skill set. What you're describing is maybe a depth of specialization, maybe of technical skills that these people haven't invested in, and they should. Right?
Which is
And that's,
a very simple thing for not only for social media managers but for anyone. If I ask you for a URL, don't give me a username. I know it's we know what's the difference between a URL and a username.
But to be fair, people, as all of us, as we go through our career, we often have less and less time to find out, and we do this with our platforms now. What are the right platforms for us to do this on? We try this, we try this, we try this, and to an extent, the technology and the market help us decide. We may think that we know, but the market, and technology is a fascinating study on this, because sometimes the best technology doesn't win, right? Sometimes a secondary technology wins because it has a better marketing or it has a better branding. And this applies to the job search as well, too. Is someone, as I said to you earlier, I follow HR people. A lot of these people may have very good technical skills in social media and branding, but I would never hire them for HR, because whenever I've listened for the substance of what they're saying, I see that's someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, or their perception of the competence is not grounded in best practices or better practices.
I know what you mean.
So there's a balance here, and to your point, you would certainly expect someone in social media to be able to have a portfolio of social media and to be able to readily and be prepared to send that to you like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of followers, so we are having Customer Experience magazine. It's following and probably joined us. Thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate that you joined the conversation, and everyone out there. Guys just came to my Twitter feed, and we would like to say thank you very much for that. So, last advices on the senior level.
Well, don't become complacent. You know, I think what happens is once people get to the more senior level, the temptation, as you said earlier, is to sort of relax a bit. And that's your choice. You're more than welcome to do that, assuming that this is your career plateau. You know, you mentioned the lady earlier in HR. If that's really where she's at, you know, it's not for you or I to say that she has to change who she is or her goals. But if you're looking for more, don't become complacent. Keep investing. It's like that expression, age is a number. You know, I know people that I respect that are 65 years old that have the minds of a 20-year-old. Mm-hmm. I know 25-year-olds who are waiting for retirement. You know, their approaches on life are so different. So we shouldn't assume based on someone's age or experience whether or not there's sort of a correlation in terms of their workplace value.
Thank you. Do you think, Brad, that at the senior level that mingling with decision makers offside work, let's say a business club or a high-level networking sessions, or especially here in the UAE, we've got more than 25 international business club. Like for each nationality and country, there's a business club, and they're very famous. There's sometimes like there's one in Abu Dhabi and there's another one in Dubai. And think of how many golf courses that we have, and we all know, like, you know, whether it's a cliche or real, but it still works. That most of the business happens there. So, do you think such strategies would be more efficient than going into the personal branding, hardcore in the business itself?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Your network is your job security, and branding is a form of sort of positioning yourself in the marketplace, but your network is your job security. And whatever you do to develop your network, invest in your network, and I don't mean technical network, I mean your network of people who you can rely on in when you need them. You know, you can look at things like Twitter followers and LinkedIn count, but how many people on a person's LinkedIn profile can you actually rely on when you need to? And the chances are you've had to invest in that relationship to get that reliance and trust, that mutual sort of return. And people need to do this more, because especially with social media, we see people who say, oh, I've got 10,000 followers on Twitter or LinkedIn, but how many of those people are really part of your network? So there's no substitute for that in-person building of network, and but I would say do both. We're in an age where the expectation is you do both.
Yeah, and I have something to add in that, and I've highlighted, I keep highlighting on this every single talk and in my speeches, or like, you know, in my business. The thing is, we are not in 2008 where if you have 1,000 likes or follower, it means a lot. Now it's a combination of so many, I won't say complicated, but it's like a combination of the number of followers, it really matters, but with the right content, with the right engagement. So if I have a high engagement on a silly topic or irrelevant topic, that's not the proper engagement. If I have the best content out there and I don't know how to drive engagement for that content, it's also like, you know, a struggle.
And that's a big one, I think, is there's a lot of people who are incredibly talented, incredibly smart, and they haven't invested in that skill set of self-promotion or social media, and it's like the tree that falls in the forest. No one finds them. No one can hear their message. And what can you do? That you simply sort of reiterate the fact that that's part of your skill set in 2016 and going forward.
Yeah, and I'd also reflect from yesterday LinkedIn in Oman session, and I would like, you know, there were few people, or I would say most of them actually, they didn't know about Pulse on LinkedIn, that I can go into Pulse and I can publish an article. Like, I don't need to be Bill Gates to write on IT. I can just share my own thoughts, and probably I can know more than anyone when it comes to my local market. Like those international gurus, like in San Francisco or Silicon Valley or around the world, they don't know much about your local. So you can reflect their thoughts and add to that your thoughts, and then you would be the, let's say, the superstar or the guru of what you are doing locally. And and this is the disruption of the traditional media. And now you've got all those social media platforms acting as not only a marketing channel, but also as let's say a distribution channels for your own content. Like you don't need a permission of any magazine to write an article nowadays. Think of a 15 years back.
Oh yeah.
Like when you, Brad, wanted to publish an article, it would take so much.
It was a big deal too. To say that you are a published author was a big deal.
Yeah.
Today, publish is a button, on your computer. Publish, publish, publish.
Yeah.
And so the value is, in one hands, being discounted to a certain degree, but it's empowering the masses of people who couldn't get a voice otherwise. And on balance, we're all benefiting from this because the industry that publishes is finding talented people the way they never would have found them before.
Absolutely.
It works both ways.
And this show is a very good example of that. We don't need a permission of any TV channel to broadcast this. It's there, it's for free. We are doing it free. You are watching free, and that was the essence of your idea when you started the HRME chat show. And this is absolutely
about building community, because what we know from our research has shown is that one of the most valuable things people want from their profession is that sense of community. And so we took that and said, what can we do in the region? And that's why we focused on this chat, this Middle East. It's not a Dubai chat, it's not a GCC chat. We really want to focus on the natural, cultural territory of the region. And it's one of those things that you just never know how you're going to connect with people. Some people will watch this live. Some people will watch this 2 months from now and find one thing that you said or I said, and then remind us later on and say, that was really valuable to me. And it's not up to us, the distributors of sort of the content or the aggregators of content, to really try and get published or say the perfect thing. It's about engagement, it's about participating, and to your point earlier, it starts with participating. People should start to participate. We had an HR chat last night from the United States online.
Yeah, I was following a bit
for our global, and what happens is you see one person who gives one comment, and then maybe 2 weeks later they give 3 comments, and then 2 months, 3 months later they're commenting on every question. And that engagement level is a form of branding, it's a form of promotion, and it builds the self-confidence in terms of the tools. And one of the number one tools that intimidates people, and it's very fair in terms of social media, is where do you start? And it's just like getting into a pool or a river. You just have to put your foot in the water first and just start.
Yeah. With that tip, it's unfortunate to say that this is going to be the end of this week HRME chat. Next week we are going to be exactly again at the same time. Today, because of my travel, I just came straight from the airport to DIFC. We're going to be back at Focus Social Academy studio in Dubai Media City. So we're looking to meet you there from 3 to 4, and you always can watch the session live on Periscope and Facebook, as well as you can watch it later on at your own comfort. Next week's topic is going to be about Ramadan.
We're going to incorporate a Ramadan theme, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be like so much of tips, whether how to find a job in Ramadan, or what to do inside the office in Ramadan, or if you are fasting or you're not fasting. I'm going to stress about when you're fasting what to do in Ramadan, and it's one of the best months that I work in, and I really enjoy, and there's so many tips for so many people out there. So if you have any thoughts or questions, keep them for next week, and we look forward to hear from you. For now, we are heading back, and it's almost the weekend, like 20 minutes for so many people, and the weekend will start. We would like to wish you a very nice and comfortable weekend. Till next week, bye-bye.